Hi, welcome to the All Things LGBTQ interview show, where we interview LGBTQ guests who are making important contributions to our communities.
All Things LGBTQ is taped at Orca Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize as being unceded Indigenous land.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
One of the wonderful aspects of having done the series of remote interviews at the Queer Craft Festival this summer is that we sort of randomly met people who were attending the festival. And during the course of interviewing some of those people, we learned about work and individuals and organizations here in Vermont that we didn't know were there, and therefore really weren't appreciating and promoting the work that they've been doing. And this is one of the interviews to share. There's a lot of work going on. So please welcome from the Northeast Kingdom Rainbow Coalition, Avi and Samantha. So if you'll say hello.
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 Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to do the interview. So Avi, you are the person to whom I was speaking at the Vermont Queer Craft Festival, and who casually mentioned, oh, I'm part of, the Northeast Kingdom Rainbow Coalition. So can you share a little bit about you and how you happen to be in Vermont and in the Northeast Kingdom? And then we'll ask Samantha to do the same.
Sure. My name is Avi. I use they, them pronouns. I am a born and raised Vermonter, and I moved to St. Johnsbury, a little more than 3 years ago, with my husband, Madison. And we started, mostly I started working with the Rainbow Coalition because I was having trouble finding queer community up here. And I happened across the coalition on Facebook and went to a planning meeting for the first Pride Fest, and the rest is history.
Alrighty, so I'm going to have Samantha introduce themselves, and then we'll circle back and let's talk about who is or what is the Northeast Kingdom Rainbow Coalition. What was the need and what is the vision? So Samantha, you're on.
Hi, again, I'm Samantha. I live in the Northeast Kingdom. I've been here for about 4 years. I had previously lived in southern Vermont in the 70s and spent decades in Boston, pretty much involved with the queer trans community in Boston as well. And I guess you could call me a transplant. So glad to be here.
Well, welcome and thank you for being here. Okay, so Avi, you said you were looking for community.
Mm-hmm.
And you stumbled across a Facebook posting for the Rainbow Coalition. So was there actually a group already in place, or was this the beginnings of a group of people wanting to create something?
So there was a group already in place. They were very new. I believe at the time I joined, which must have been November or so of 2021. I think the group had only existed for a few months at that point. Yeah, and we've been working since then. We our main focus at first was NEK Pride Fest, hosting the very first Pride Festival and parade in the Northeast Kingdom.
And when was that?
That was in June of 2022.
Okay, so the Rainbow Coalition has been around for approximately 4 years now?
Give or take. Oh no, that must have been. Oh, it must have been no. It was the first Pride Fest was in 2023. So we moved to St. Johnsbury in 22. So they started, the group formed, I think, around mid 2022, and then hosted the first Pride Fest in June of 23.
Okay, and Samantha, when did you become involved with the coalition?
I became involved with the coalition in January 2024. Um, I had I had sought out the organization in a very similar way, um, in that I had the feeling that there was a queer trans community, but wasn't sure because I was rather new. But I did some research and was able to find the Rainbow Coalition very easily, and I guess I fell in love with it. So.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so both of you have referenced looking for community.
Mhm.
And those of us who live here in Vermont know that it can get kind of isolated and kind of lonely at times. So
Mhm.
what is it that the coalition does to try and create community and opportunities for you to meet other queer folk?
Mhm. Um, we host a couple larger events per year, and those are our main like fundraisers, getting our name out there. And that would be Pride NEK Pride Fest, and also our upcoming fall event Halloween. Throughout the year, we also host community nights, other events recognizing Trans Day of Remembrance and Trans Day of Visibility. And we also have a fairly large digital presence. We have a Discord server where a lot of the community building happens. A lot of folks join us on there, and are able to make friends virtually before being able to meet in person. Because as you said, it can be very isolated in Vermont, especially in the NEK where everything is very rural, very spread out.
Okay, where do the events actually occur? Because as I recall, the Pride Festival occurred in Newport. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Pride
Yes.
Fest is up in Newport. This year, Halloween is going to be in St. Johnsbury. Um, and we try to split events about 50-50 between Newport and St. Johnsbury. And we're also hoping to expand and have more community nights throughout the kingdom and places like Glover or up in we made a connection with Northwood Stewardship Center, which I believe is up in Holland, Vermont, somewhere around there. And primarily the south the southern tip of St. Johnsbury, and then the northern tip and up in Newport is where our main events are held.
Okay. So Samantha, are these events well attended?
Well, if I could comment on two that Avi mentioned,
Okay.
the Trans Day of Visibility and the Trans Day of Remembrance. It really strikes me as ironic in that two of our major holidays are either asking society to accept us or to mourn our dead.
Mm.
Yeah. As far as the two major events go, however, they've been greatly attended. The Pride Fest has a reputation for bringing visitors to Newport. Um, Also, patronizing local merchants, which is very important. We were told that, aside from the eclipse, ours are the biggest events in Newport. We're very pleased and flattered. Um, as far as Halloween is concerned, as Avi said, it's going to be in St. Johnsbury this year. In the past year, we have sort of cross-pollinated into St. Johnsbury, where we were primarily centered in Newport for so long. Now, a good major proportion, let's say half of our team is located in St. Johnsbury and half in Newport. And I have to stress the word team because that's exactly what we are. There's no autocracy. There's visibility amongst the 7 members of the team and board. And each team member has something to bring to the party as far as, what their capabilities are, what their desires are. And basically, people in the team raise their hand and say, "How can I help?" And I think that's marvelous.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, the Pride Festival, is it a single day event or is
Mhm.
it multiple days?
Pride Fest is a single event. Our
Okay.
parades start at noon, and directly after the parade, approximately 12:45 or so, the celebration continues down to Gardner Park in Newport, where this year we had we had 4 live acts playing. Many vendors, other nonprofits were tabling there. We had food trucks, and we had no rain. So that was wonderful.
You did well. You lucked out.
Mhm.
Okay, so what has been the response from the communities? And if you could talk both about the response from our queer communities to you, and then sort of the general geographic community.
Mhm.
Have you felt a degree of support? Have you encountered any challenges? Because I know when uh, the library in St. Johnsbury was doing Drag Queen Story Hour, there was an attempt at, you know, a protest against it, but the larger community showed up in such big numbers that this small group of people were totally overwhelmed. Have you had a similar experience?
Yes, I would say that we have had a very similar experience in that regard. Um, the response from the queer community has mostly has, I would say, primarily been joy and also surprise. Um, I think like you, a lot of folks still don't know that we're here. So we clearly need to up our advertising a bit. Um, and from the community at large, we have mostly had a lot of support. We get a lot of support from the city of Newport and from the town of St. Johnsbury, the governments themselves, which was a surprise to me, but like it, I'm extremely grateful for. And on the whole, I would say that when people see us around, they're happy we're here. They're happy that these things that the coalition exists, that the events we put on happen, and all of the or any of the detractors, I guess, that we've had have been mostly angry Facebook comments. I'd say you always get a couple of people driving by revving their engines. But other than that, we really haven't had much in the way of like protest to what we're doing, which is really wonderful and heartwarming.
As far as the drag story hour is concerned, um, yes, counter protesters showed up in much greater numbers than protesters, but numbers don't make you right or wrong.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it was wonderful that queer and trans folk and the entire LGBTQIA community, it showed up in support. Um, And it would have kind of been nice if we didn't have to.
Mm.
But
Well,
I also have a comment. Keith, you mentioned the communities, and I think you were right on target by putting an S at the end of the word communities, because throughout the country, organizations such as the Northeast Kingdom Rainbow Coalition are independent, smaller organizations which support specific geography. Like, for instance, 3 counties for us. And for the most part, there there isn't as much connection between all the small organizations as will probably happen in the future. But at this point, when we talk about, let's say, people throughout the world, the trans community, well, which one? There's a whole lot of them, and as also the expression the trans agenda, which I've never seen, so I guess I can't comment on that. But one thing that I have noticed in Vermont is that there's a desire for unity, and started taking place last summer when we had a Pride Summit where approximately a dozen Vermont groups got together was that Barry, Avi?
I think it was Bethel.
yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, got together in Bethel for a day-long discussion. And who are we? What do we do? And that was extremely helpful, because sometimes you hear names and you don't have faces to put by them, and it was a great opportunity to be able to do that.
So you've talked about the agenda, which I've been hearing about for years, but I'm still waiting to see a copy of it as well. But looking at the Northeast Kingdom Rainbow Coalition, do you have an idea of what it is that you would like to create going forward? Is there more than just doing, some, the Pride Festival and, the other fundraising events and the social hours? Is there something else that you're looking at achieving?
Well, our mission statement is to bring queer equity, liberation, and joy to the Northeast Kingdom. And some of the work beyond the social aspects that we're doing now, we have our peer support program, which is a way for folks who need the support of their fellow LGBT peers. They can reach out to us with a form, and we will arrange for someone to come and meet with them to have a coffee or a tea or whatever it is, and chat and see how we can help, see what support they need. And something that Samantha and I are both really excited about is our new Wings micro grant program, where we are now able to offer micro grants up to $500 to trans and gender nonconforming people in the NEK to get gender affirming care or resources such as clothing, electrolysis, HRT, rides to doctor's appointments, because transportation is honestly one of the biggest issues in this area.
Transportation and housing is
Yeah.
universal. Yeah.
Yes, the universal. And I'm hoping that after we run this program for a bit or even sooner, that we can expand more and explore other ways that we can bring mutual aid to the queer community in the Northeast Kingdom, because mutual aid is in these times is one of the most important things that I think anybody can do, is to help their neighbor.
Now, you've both mentioned Facebook page. Do you also have a website?
We do. It's nekrc.org.
Okay, because we'll make sure that that gets, both of those get listed, shown during the course of this interview, because you had mentioned, the granting and helping people getting access to gender affirming care, et cetera. And I was wondering if some of those resources might be available by somebody accessing, your website or the Facebook page.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, because go ahead, Samantha.
I was going to say one of my hopes, as I see the Wings program being launched, is that other organizations, not only in Vermont but elsewhere, take a look at this program and ask themselves, how can we get together and do something similar? Because
Yeah.
the need exists not only in the Northeast Kingdom, but I'm sure all over the United States and probably the world too.
I was going to say, at this point in time, with everything that we're being confronted with, knowing where to go for peer support is essential, and having that sense of community and being connected, that I'm not just floating, and access to health care that is competent and respectful, that I don't have to I don't have to teach you what I need for care. You have a sense of what it is that you should be asking me for. Okay. So with that, thank you for spending this time with us. You will send me information and a poster for your upcoming event so we can start promoting it. And if there are events occurring, please let us know, because to the extent possible, we want to share that information and we want to overwork you.
Very good.
All righty.
Absolutely.
So thank you. So last November, Linda did an interview with our newest elected out LGBTQIA2S plus representative, Will Greer. And I just thought it might be nice to check in and say, okay, you finished the first year of your first session. How'd it go? Any
Well,
surprises? So welcome, Will, and jump right in.
oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Keith, for having me to discuss all this. And I've had really a long and very chaotic summer to process everything that happened in 6 months in Montpelier. I actually just got back from Montpelier for the first time all summer. Yesterday, I had to go up there to do some errands and run some, work stuff around, and kind of got like traumatic, like, reliving of like the past 6 months. And I was like, okay, maybe I came too soon, but that's okay. I got to work year round. So even though we're a citizen legislature and we're only part-time, we're still doing stuff year round. So that was fine. I have to go up there and do my duty. But, I look back at the past 6 months after processing everything over the summer. I think that there's just so much, there's so many options and pathways that a new legislator can go down when they get to Montpelier. And it's really hard to ground yourself in what you're doing, what your constituents want. And I, I think that like a lot of legislators, we get going on different paths and we get going on different, subjects, and we get pulled in this direction and that direction. And for me, I really tried to stick to the couple of issues that gained traction in committee. And, a few of those were, one was in a, labor committee, one was in the economics committee. And so I really tried to put my attention towards those, knowing that others, kind of recognized those bills that I was, advocating for and had sponsored. So I think that for me was, hard to navigate, was how it was going to be pulled in so many different directions. And what someone had told me before I entered the legislature was that, when you're in the House, there's only one agenda, and that's the speaker's agenda. And in the Senate, there's 30 different agendas for each senator. And I've actually found that to be kind of, false. It's not just one agenda in the House. It really is like 150 different agendas because everyone has different, constituents that they need to help, different bills that they're interested in, different topics. So I thought it was going to be more organized. I've come to find out that it is a lot more hectic than I could have ever imagined.
I want to start with, you're on which committee?
Yep.
And was this the committee that you truly wished to be assigned to?
My perfectly honest answer, God, no. I did not sign up for this committee, but I'm on corrections and institutions.
Okay.
And I want to talk a little bit about what entering that committee was like and kind of the transformation I've gone through. That would have been the last committee I would have been on. I personally have a lot of family history with corrections on my father's side. And, it's not the most positive history. I grew up not necessarily loving or caring for the people in our family that were incarcerated because they had done bad things to those that I loved and that we all loved. Yeah. And it was a really complicated relationship. So first, you only find out what committee you're going to be on like a day or two before session starts. So I had picked all these committees that I knew I was interested in, that I'd like to learn more about, or that I had knowledge on already. And we got 3 picks. And my pick, I did not get that. That was not one of my picks. And it took me several, I was a little, I don't want to say angry, but I just felt displaced and kind of, that I wasn't in the right spot that I was meant to be. But as session kept going on, I realized that it was a growing moment for me and that I was going to start learning how to manage the things that I had tried to avoid my whole life. And I know that's deeper, possibly on a personal level, because at the end of the day, representatives, we're humans, and we, yes, we're sent there to serve our constituents. And that's the other reason you have to learn and grow, is because at the end of the day, I can't check out. I have to be there for the people that sent me there to be on that committee, and that was definitely, that was a heavy lift from what I was expecting going into the legislature. There were many moments that I had to, go out in the hallway and really, kind of cry and realize like these are some really deep conversations we're having and tough discussion on bills. And sometimes you have to just walk out of the room for a minute and process what's going on.
Okay, that's an entirely different perspective than what most new legislators state were the challenges when they started serving. Usually it's about, having to get used to making compromise and, how colleagues and alliances get built, etc. Very few legislators have shared that this is how you could become personally challenged by the work of being a legislator. You have no idea what bill is going to be introduced and how it may trigger a personal experience. And I know that your committee, one of the really hard issues that you're dealing with is addiction services within a correctional setting. And that you as a committee as a whole are fairly new members and learning all of that process. So here you are learning Vermont's correctional system at the same time learning Vermont's legislative system. So, okay, so looking at the legislative system, you have a unique background in that your mother had actually done work in the Texas legislature. So you probably more so than other new legislators had a clue about legislative processing. What about Vermont's system? Came as a surprise to you, or it was something that you needed to reevaluate how you processed information?
Well, going for me at least, I actually had, Senator Campion. He was my professor in college. So I was actually able to learn from him a lot of how the Senate worked. And he also knew about the House because he had served in the House. But I was a lobbyist before I was in the legislature. So I actually worked in the building and had that inside knowledge of how that building operated. So that's why, other young legislators that go in probably do have to learn about compromise and making friendships and alliances. I kind of entered there already knowing all the people that I was going to be serving with because I had been working for, a lot of them over the past 2 years. So for me, that wasn't as difficult. And you're right that my mother, she actually still works in the Texas state legislature, working behind the scenes with all that nonsense. But we share different opinions, and that's okay. But I definitely learned a lot about procedure from her and how things work through, and that because every state has a Republican form of government, and that it's set up a certain way in the Constitution, and in order to be a state, you had to follow X certain criteria. So in terms of the actual structure of government, Vermont and Texas are very similar. So, from an early age, being exposed to that really helped set the stage for me to want to be involved in it when I came up here and started working, even though I had no idea that I would get involved in Vermont politics whatsoever. I came up here with the explicit goal of just writing right down the street, writing, poems and stories at Bennington College. And now I'm somehow serving in legislature, serving Bennington College and also the whole Bennington community, of course. But it's funny how that happened. But so that was something that they don't talk about, going back to, the difference I had with other young legislators is I think for me, I kind of had a better idea of where my skill sets were best used. And so to feel like that wasn't fully taken into consideration, that definitely threw me off. But again, I try to be optimistic and just look at, learning about the criminal justice system in Vermont, or specifically the correctional system in Vermont, is just a learning curve. And I just got to take it slow and easy, and hopefully I'll get immersed in it. And you're right too, that the hardest one for me was our bill. And I'll be honest, I'm slipping on the bill number right now, but the one on, drug treatment services in the prisons, that one was hard. But a lot of things go through our committee, which is one thing that I did not realize when getting onto that committee, was actually that it might be beneficial to me because I like going in all different directions. And so we might get a bill that's about state lands, forest, and parks, and then we'll get one about, mandates to work in the office. I know Governor Scott just made a decision that people need to go back in the office. That's something that would go back through our committee, is a statutory, change that we would make in law. So there's a lot of random, I don't want to call them random necessarily, but almost like miscellaneous things that get thrown into our committee that kind of spices it up a little bit so I can, get in my lane and, find something else to focus my attention on. Because there's some members of our committee, and that's another thing, you got to delegate. All 11 of us aren't going to know every single bill in the legislature, just like we do know every bill that goes through our committee because we're there day in, day out. But we're going to obviously delegate tasks. So I was able to really focus on the ones that, didn't cause as much, emotional, growing pains as it would for others because they didn't have the same situation. But it's been a processing moment for sure.
I was going to say, I don't, unless you are part of the legislative process, you don't understand how expansive committee bills can be, that just because there is a specific title to the committee, that you're not going to be talking about issues that you're like, wait a minute, what's the connection here? So you had talked about Brian Campion essentially mentoring you. Is there any type of mentoring process that happens in the House for new legislators?
Yeah, so it's actually, I'll do my best to recount kind of the contemporary history around it.
Okay.
And specifically as a Democrat, I can't speak on how Republicans do it because the way it's done is by caucus. So in the Democratic caucus, the way it works, Republicans, you can take notes if you're watching this, is when we get past the primary, you're assigned a campaign mentor to help you process the coming months up till the November election, and honestly, all the way to January. If you know that you're going to be successful in your general, or if you end up being successful, you want to have those stepping stones set in place. And I had a mentor, Representative Campbell from the Northeast Kingdom, from St. Johnsbury, total opposite ends of the state, but it was so important to get an outsider's perspective on how I should be going about and doing things in my own district. So that was helpful. And then once you're in the legislature, you get assigned a mentor from the caucus as well. Totally different. I guess some people, they may request to have the same person, but I honestly didn't care. Scott and I, we got along so well. I was like, if I don't like my next mentor, I can just keep going back to Scott. But of course, I get one of my good friends, David Durfee, who's the representative up in Shaftesbury, which I think was it was kind of purposeful because he sits right next to me in the chamber. So I can turn right around and say, what's going on? And then also, if we're back home over the weekend and I'm having a problem, I can just say, meet me at the coffee shop in 5 minutes, and we'll just meet there. And so I think that was almost a purposeful decision to have, him. He sits next to me in the chamber. He's close to me geographically. Session's really stressful, obviously. And so I think they wanted to, make sure that that was set up in that manner for me and for all the other new legislators as well. But from my experience, I think that's where that came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had shared that you were out meeting with a constituent just prior to, our doing this interview. What is it that you are currently doing as a representative to maintain contact with the people that you represent?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I also got a phone call last week, and I love this person very much. So I thank her for calling me if she watches this, who, I don't want to say criticized me. I mean, criticism's great, but recommended that I have more regular contact through my email list that I have. I have about 400 people in my district or close to my district. I'd say about 250 to 300 of them live in my district, and the rest are either around the state or mostly in surrounding towns. But she wanted me to stay more in contact through that email list, saying that, the things happening with the Trump administration, things that are impacting Vermont's budget, can you do more updates on that? And said, I really wish that our other representatives in the region had more regular contact like that. And I mentioned that, I've sent out like 4 or 5 emails over session, which was a start because, to my recollection and knowledge from hearing from other people, all the other representatives in our area in contemporary, politics, 10, 20 years have never sent out a newsletter, or really done anything organized like that. So, I'm trying to take baby steps and obviously, learn my way and figure out what works best for me on time, because originally I was like, I want to do it weekly. And then I realized that might be an overshoot because people maybe not want to read, all that every week. But then I was like, let me do it every 2 weeks. And then it turned into every month. And then it kind of into session got crazy. And then I just did a big recap, but, trying to pace myself more. So that's one thing I've been doing, is keeping that email chain, because those are people that are really active, that reach out, through emails, because they're part of organizations that send us things. They just reach out because they know that we can do X, Y, and Z to help them. So that's been great to keep in touch with those folks. I'm definitely going to start using Front Porch Forum more often, because that's such a great connection tool to get in touch with people that maybe don't know necessarily what I'm up to or what we're doing in the legislature. But that's definitely, there's so many different forms of media we can use. It's really tricky. I try to stay up to date with Instagram and Facebook. I try to post stories, with like even just like road construction updates or town updates on what's going on, just so people, kind of see, I'm out there, and at least that I'm alive, and they can do a check-in with me. But in terms of like the day to day, it is off session, especially over the summer. We don't really do much in Montpelier. I mean, there's nothing really going on. Legislative Council is working on everything we just did the past 6 months. But when we're here over the summer, we're going to events, we're going to, events that people have organized or that are official, like, state agencies that are holding things. Like we've had, several openings of, for example, the BART clinics here in Bennington. We've done tours with Representative Ballard and others that have come down here to tour our facilities. So we're doing things like that. And then on, the constituent level, I would say I've helped over the course of the summer. Now we're entering into the fall, so it's a little different, but I'd say about a dozen people or so with specific, needs that they either, they're having an issue with, road construction, like we were just talking about, healthcare, education, and direct needs that they're like, I need help with this, and then others, of course, I've been communicating with about, general issues that they've written to me about. So it's not necessarily an issue they need help with, but they just want to know my stance or position on something. So one thing I do that apparently no other legislator does in the state, because I've been told that by multiple people in the state house, and they don't mean that to, they think it's very unusual, but I handwrite all my constituents that write me an email back a letter. And I sign it, and I do it on, official letterhead and everything that I've made and bought, because it's personal touches like that I think really matter to people, especially nowadays when we feel so divided and so disconnected. To get a physical, I mean, I have my little envelopes right here, but to get this envelope with your name written out on it, and then you open it up, and it's going to be, a letter from your representative detailing not just a thank you for your response, I'll get back to you, but an actual, like, this is why I voted this way, or this is how I feel about this issue, or these were the particular things that bothered me when I voted for this bill, even though I voted for it. So a very detailed letter. And I've had people that have told me like they have it literally framed up at their house because they're like, it's so beautiful and it was so sweet. And I had one woman who told me she had framed it up. She's like, I've lived in Bennington 66 years. And she's like, I've never gotten a handwritten letter from any of my elected officials, federal, state, local, you name it. And she was like, just thank you. And I even said, I was like, if I remember that letter correctly, I didn't really agree with you. And she's like, I don't care. It was so sweet. And I was like, well, thank you. I'm glad honesty went a long way in the sincerity of the letter. So that's how I stay in touch with constituents. And then, of course, I'm very fortunate to have a district that's kind of on the smaller end in terms of size. So I can drive and catch up with people too and just knock in at their house and say hi. So that's how I spend a lot of my off time.
I was going to say, you mentioned that at the end of the session, you sent out a sort of update of, okay, this is what happened.
Mhm.
Okay, so share with us,
Yeah.
what you see as being the major accomplishments of this first year of the biennium. And the follow-up is going to be, and what got left on the table, and what do we really need to focus on in January?
Yep. So I'll do a plug about immigration because that's something that I'm particularly interested in right now as it relates to the criminal justice system and prisons and how we contract with ICE. And I'll touch on a few other things as well. But I want to just talk about the two main bills that will probably touch every corner of Vermont and every Vermonter will see in the coming months and years. And the first one was Act 69. That was the big housing bill that we passed. That I'm just trying to, get a few things off the top of my head. We originally had a cap on there that people, or I should say developers, could utilize some of the grand list value to build new housing and essentially, give them an incentive to build in certain areas. There was originally a cap of $40 million for that statewide. That act ended up making it $200 million. So quite an aggressive approach to it. We don't even think we're going to hit the cap. But the point is that we're trying to really address the housing shortage that we have in Vermont. I said this in the primary, and I still say it today. Government, can help aid in the financing of, construction. But at the end of the day, it's really going to have to be private market solutions that are actually going to build the housing and be that, whether we're talking about the labor market, the wage market, the materials market, and now with tariffs, of course, that's thrown our housing market off completely. But all that's going to be influenced by where developers and the people that are actually doing the building are going to want to build. So it's twofold, in that regard. The government can help out, but it's also going to take the private sector to do its part and hopefully, really take the time and commitment to invest in Vermont. We, of course, in the midst of all that, didn't really get to the heart of the issue, in my opinion, which is really we have, I think with zoning, we're coming a long ways, but really when it comes to permitting, we've not done what's needed to address this overburdening permitting process, which is it's so cumbersome and it's so burdening on people when they're trying to purchase land to develop, and do it in an efficient manner where they can build housing that families can afford and that workers can afford. So that was Act 69. I won't go too much into the details of it, but we changed a lot of other little things along the way. I've heard from some people mixed opinions on it. Some people say it's definitely going to address the housing shortage. Other people are saying that it's probably not going to have as big of a dent as we would hope, but we'll see. Obviously, it's a 10-year program. So we'll see what happens and how much gets leveraged in these coming years, and we'll adjust accordingly. And the big one that I've really followed, because it affects my district in particular, is Act 73, which that was what H 454 was in the legislature. That was the big education bill. When we came back in June to vote on that, I just want to emphasize for everyone here that I voted no. And I voted no for two reasons. One, well, actually, I voted no for several reasons, but in terms of, I have two very distinct parts of my district. I have the North Bennington School District, which is a non-operating district that tuitions all of its students, and that's in North Bennington. I happen to live in that district, but that's besides the point. I don't take, affinity to either side of my district. I have to represent everyone, and that's something I pride myself on. So we have the Village District, which is non-operating, and then of course we have the town of Bennington that I represent, which is all part of the supervisory union, and that's fully operating K through 12 public school. So there's two very distinct education viewpoints depending on where you are in the district, and it's really about a third, maybe 2/5 of people that live in North Bennington, and about the other 2/3, 3/5 that live in Bennington. And that was a really strong, people had really strong opinions on both sides about that. And that was a really difficult decision for me to balance. But at the end of the day, I sent out to that 400-person email list. I said, send me your thoughts on education. I got dozens of responses. No one was positive about it. I look at my email inbox, of course, NEA, Visa, all these different, lobbying associations have gotten, forms going to our inboxes. And again, I know all these people and they're all saying don't vote for it. And that's the other interesting thing about that bill. It was not a large volume of people that reached out. Dozens of people reached out, but it was the fact that these weren't just forms and cookie cutter responses. These were people actually writing letters. That's rare these days. You usually, when you're a legislator, you get, like Gun Sense Vermont. I'm going to, give them a little shout out here. They'll send a form and it'll be 10 responses pretty much with the same thing. People can tweak them a little bit. When I was a lobbyist, we also sent formed responses and we allowed people the option to edit them. But most people sent them and they were cookie cutter, and that's how a lot of those forms come into our inbox. But these were very different, which really made me, consider them a lot heavier than you would a form response, because someone just clicks a button potentially and they've now voiced their opinion, and you can't just rely solely on that, obviously. But when you have people writing heartfelt emails and letters to you, that's when this is a lot more serious of a conversation than just spending a couple weeks in Montpelier trying to hash out the details. I went into session in November thinking we were going to really deliver property tax relief for Vermonters. I do not believe that we have done that. I thought we were going to walk in there and we were going to say, let's give local communities the opportunity to showcase that they can provide a quality education and do it at a low cost, or the lowest cost possible. at a price that would make sense for taxpayers. I thought they would delegate that to local communities because you see your school board members in the grocery store. You know how to contact them as well. Local communities know how to spend local dollars best. And I understand there's an equity argument to it, and that has to be addressed too, to make sure that our property rich towns don't spend all this money that property poor towns can't pay. And I live in a town that's considered a property poor town. But I thought we would walk in with that mindset. But it was clear from about mid-session onwards that this, what I just pointed out, was not the avenue people wanted to go down, and that there was a select few, and I will not name them, but a select few of people that thought that they knew what was best for my community and wanted to make a moral standing on what they thought was right instead of trying to look at what actually works. And what always works isn't always the prettiest and always the best, but it works. And I just think that we really lost sight of that. And I came home and I did a presentation in July about education. And I told the group of people, I said, I feel like I personally, on my own didn't fail you, but I as a collective in that body failed you. You sent a clear message when you sent 21 additional Republicans to the House and 6 to the Senate, because we know what their campaign slogans were. They wanted change on property taxes and the Affordable Heat Act. Those were their two things that they sent, they poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into Vermont to fight against. And we didn't even address that one that we could really get behind. We all wanted property tax relief. And we didn't address the bigger drivers of education spending like healthcare and insurance and building deferred maintenance costs. I mean, we're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars in deferred maintenance costs that we've pushed off for almost 20 years now. And actually, the last school construction project was built in Bennington, and I'm slipping on the date, but over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's like we have really put a lot of these things on the back burner, and now it's just coming full steam ahead when inflation, tariffs, an unfriendly federal administration to public education is coming in. A lot of factors going against us right now. And, again, I felt like Act 73, I voted against it. I do not think that it was good for Vermonters, both public schools, small schools, rural schools, and of course the one no one wants to talk about, independent schools. I have an independent school here that serves people with disabilities and learning disabilities, I should say, but that comes with physical and mental, disabilities. And that just, there's a lot to that argument. There's so many dimensions. And I just, for anyone listening to this, don't paint the independent schools all one way. There are some that, as we know, and we can talk about that as well, that do not protect LGBTQ students, on paper or in principle. I don't know. I'm not going to attest to every school, but, just keep that, open-minded when we think about those schools as well.
And with that, I need to say thank you for spending this time with us. Oh my goodness, where did it go so quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I want a commitment
Yes.
that you get town meeting day week off.
Yes.
Come back, we'll pick up this conversation and say, okay, what's happening in the session? What are our priorities? What should they be? And how do we help you to advance that agenda?
Thank you. That sounds great. And I just want to put one plug in there because we're on this episode. Last little thing, Victory Fund. If you can donate to Victory Fund right now, there are candidates running for state and local races across the country right now. We have thousands of positions that could be filled by qualified, awesome LGBTQ folks. So please, if you can, donate to there or run yourself. And if you want to run and you have the energy and you're built up and you have a particular issue or something that you want to help with, contact me. I will be happy to sit down with you. I'm sitting down with someone tomorrow to talk about running for office here in Bennington County. So it's like, that those conversations are happening all the time. So please, either donate or run yourself.
And we need to have more of those
Yes.
conversations. So thank you for this
Thank
time.
you so much. Yes.
Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember, resist.